This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Jacob Rees Mogg.
Well, good evening. I'm in Leicestershire this evening. I've come here to speak for Andrew Bridgen, who's one of the local MPs, a good Conservative MP who came to speak to us in North East Somerset last year. So I'm returning the favour, and it's a lovely place to be. And what are we going to be discussing this evening? We're going to be discussing Donald Tusk and whether we are all headed for hell in a handcart, and whether you think failing to have a plan, as he accuses us of, was worthy of hell, or if we had a plan in the first place anyway. And then we're going to talk about Mrs May and what she should be doing next week, and how in Brussels we should be sending a clear signal to our friends in the European Union. But Donald Tusk really ought to be allowed to speak for himself. This is what he had to say.
I've been wondering what that special place in hell looks like for those who promoted Brexit without even a sketch of a plan how to carry it safely.
And this is what we have to say to Mr Tusk.
The bells of hell go ting-a-ling-a-ling for you, but not for me. And the little devils, how they sing-a-ling-a-ling for you, but not for me. Oh, death, where is thy sting-a-ling-a-ling? Oh, pray thy victory. The bells of hell go ting-a-ling-a-ling.
Now, many of you will recognise that First World War tune. I can't claim I was there at the time. I'm not that old. But the bells of hell go ting-a-ling-a-ling for you, but not for me, Mr Tusk, I think, is the answer, as your European Union is in endless trouble. We've seen the French withdraw their ambassador from Italy. Now, this may be in a fit of pique. It may be that the President of France has got a little bit cross. But it is, in fact, a most extraordinary diplomatic move. Ambassadors are normally withdrawn as a prelude to war. The French last withdrew their ambassador from Italy in 1940, when France was invaded. So the issue of withdrawing ambassadors is not one to be taken lightly. The French economy, the Italian economy have gone into recession. The German economy has turned down very sharply. The UK economy is likely to be one of the fastest growing European economies, in spite of the best efforts of the Bank of England to talk it down. So the EU looks to be in an awful muddle, and all its president can do is make rude remarks about the British. But we don't really mind, do we? Because we laugh at Mr Tusk. We say, Tusk, Tusk, to the president, one of the 5 presidents of the European Union. But there is a question underlying what he said, and that's about the plan. I think we had a very clear plan, and that was to leave the European Union. And leaving the European Union self-evidently means leaving the customs union and leaving the single market, because those are the biggest building blocks of the European Union. They're what make it function, give it its power, its authority, its ability to make our laws. So I think there was clarity in what we wanted to do. But I'm very keen to hear from you as to what you have to say, and you can call, as you know, 0345 6060 973. And we're going to go to a new caller from Andrew in Ealing. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Hello, Jacob. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you.
I think Tusk's comments were unintelligent for 2 reasons. Firstly, it was impossible to plan the outcome of a negotiation. So a plan was impossible, full stop. My second point about him is I don't think any criticism could be levied on the part of not having a plan. I think the criticism is in not having any leadership from the leading Brexiteers once the referendum result was delivered. And to be honest, Jacob, I have to kind of blame you partly for that as well. We have not had a Prime Minister leading the country who believes in Brexit, and we needed that. Clearly, Nigel Farage was not in with a chance for obvious reasons. Boris Johnson, fair credit to him, he put himself forward, but Michael Gove stabbed him in the back at the last minute, which, in my opinion, is absolutely unforgivable. And Jacob, to be honest, I'd have to say I was disappointed in you. You seemed to go quiet, and when push came to shove, in my opinion, you didn't quite stand up to the plate.
OK, but I backed a Brexiteer all the way through. I backed Boris Johnson until he withdrew. Then I backed Michael Gove, and then I backed Andrew Leadsom, because I share your analysis. I thought then, and I think now, that we needed somebody who wanted to leave to lead the negotiations. I thought that was essential. And thank you for accusing me of going quiet. It's something I'm very rarely criticised for. But I've made it pretty clear that I was supporting a leaver because I think your analysis hits the nail on the head, that the negotiations are where a plan is tested. You can have a plan, you can have all sorts of ideas, and people did. They put out their plans vigorously during the referendum. But the plan, once it meets the negotiation, inevitably changes. So anyway, thank you very much for that. We're now going to John in Newcastle. John, you're another new caller, so you're very welcome.
Hi there, Jacob. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. So we're asking, do you think leaving the European Union was a good enough plan? Do you think it was a good enough plan?
I most certainly do. Like, if you were the hundreds of thousands that's up here north, as you know, by even Sunderland last week, 70% of them still voted out of the EU. I don't know what I remember last week, like when you mentioned that there was an alternative question that was going to go forward with Mrs. May across to Brussels and such like. That gave me belief that the backstop was going to be removed and that you had information to give to the EU regarding this issue. But by the sounds of things, she's never done a thing. Could you tell me one thing? Has Mrs. May got interests, financial interests in the EU, whereby she doesn't want to leave the EU?
No, I'm sure that's not the case. But you think, if I understand you correctly, that leaving the European Union was quite enough plan. That's what people voted for, and that's what we need to deliver. That doesn't mean a deal. That doesn't mean necessarily a negotiation. We just leave on the 29th of March. I don't want to put words in your mouth, John, but is that essentially what you're saying?
100%.
Yeah,
now, I've got one more question.
You're all right, fire away.
And it's very important. I don't want you to snigger. I don't want you to answer it. But this has been laid on my heart for a while. I want you to seriously think and go away and ask for wisdom and knowledge and guidance from higher authorities than what that is surrounding you. And I've done a lot of praying about this, and I believe, sir, that you, when the time comes, which it will do, to put yourself forward for the leader of the Conservative Party, because we need a person like you, as Sir Winston Churchill said many years ago, when we were in the doldrums, we brought our guys back. His first words were, "We will never surrender." And that's what we need in this country. We need somebody strong, positive, directive, no lies, believes in democracy,
Well, John, thank you so much for your prayers and for your vote of confidence in me. I'm only a backbench MP, but I greatly appreciate your kindness and for taking the trouble to call. I hope you'll call us again on future programmes. We're asking the question today, do you think to leave the European Union is a good enough plan on its own? Peter in Stockport, what's your view on that?
Good afternoon, Jacob. It's very nice to speak to you.
Thank you.
I would like to say that we've been in urgent need of leaving the EU for 30, 40 years. And I have an idea, I don't know how you'd feel about it, of an easy way to make sure that it happens.
Sorry, you faded out. Are you speaking into your handset? I can't hear you.
Yes, I am. Is that any better?
That's better. Yes, far away.
Right. Yeah. It's to do with the Bill of Rights and the last bit of it about treason and sedition. And just as an ordinary man about town, the way I see it at the moment, what's happening with our government seems to be verging on treason in what they'll end up having brought on our country. And if that Bill of Rights was adhered to, I think it could be solved pretty quickly. What do you think?
I'm trying to get to the question, do you think leaving the European Union's plan enough, rather than Mr. Tusk's view of hell? And I think from what you're saying, you think a plan is good enough, and that watering it down, you're going a bit further than I do, is seditious and should be prosecuted for sedition. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I would go a little bit further than that. But
all right.
we don't need to water it down. We just need to walk away.
Yeah, there's a very strong.
Let them come to us.
There's a very strong feeling coming across today. I think so far all the callers are in favour of us just walking away. And we've got a text come in from David saying there were plenty of plans from at least 2014 onwards. The Remain negotiating team has ignored or rubbished them all, including David Davis and all the arguments for WTO terms. And I think that's right. I think there's been a deliberate policy to try to ignore the plans that have been put forward and to focus on what the Remainers want to do, and that has been a real issue for us. That's what we're discussing today. Do you think leaving the European Union was a good enough plan on its own? And later on, we're going to talk about what Mrs May should be doing. How do we take this forward? Because it's not just about where we are, it's where we go next. And we want to know next week what Mrs May should be thinking about, what she should be talking about. But now it's coming up to 6:15 and it's time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz. Welcome back. We're asking, in response to Donald Tusk suggesting that we're all agents of Beelzebub, whether or not you think that leaving the European Union was a good enough plan on its own. And the first caller this evening made the excellent point that in a negotiation, whatever you've planned changes anyway. So isn't he undermining the basis of Article 50, which says you will negotiate for 2 years? You don't just slap down a plan and say, this is what we're doing, thanks very much. Or at any rate, that's unlikely to be a successful approach. So, Peter in Wimbledon, I hope you're on the line and be very interested in your views, whether you think leaving was a good enough plan.
Very good evening to you, Jacob. The first point I'd like to make about Donald Tusk's comments, I don't think criticising anyone, never mind politician, for mere suggestion that all politicians who take advantage of poor, naive, ill-informed and uneducated should deserve their place in hell. And I think there's nothing wrong with that at all. I find it actually facetious and amusing that someone actually speaks for the people who were betrayed. And the second point about your question you just raised on the subject of leaving is good enough plan. No, it's not, because you guys have been asking us to vote for Brexit to take control of our borders. And the only border we're going to have with the European Union, and the only land border, is in Ireland. And apparently, according to you, this border is no longer required. So there's a bit of a contradiction here, Jacob. And the thing is, I could hardly remember any one of you guys ever speaking about Irish border issue, which became now apparently the biggest stumbling block to get your Brexit over the line. So to say just...
First of all, thank you. Did you say in your first beginning to the answer that you thought that he was standing up for people who were stupid?
No.
That seemed to be your implication.
No. I said poor, naive, ill-informed, and uneducated on this matter.
Okay, so what's the difference between that and stupid? Which I was just using one word and you were using four.
No,
but don't you think that's a bit disrespectful to voters?
Wait, what's disrespectful to voters for people like you to take advantage of them? Because those people at the time, I'll ask you again, how many times yourself or anyone else on your side has discussed the issue of Irish border and Good Friday Agreement before the referendum took place? That 2.5 years down the line, none of you got a solution to this problem. And the thing is to say that we voted to take control of our borders, and apparently
that's your second point. Let's come to your second point, but let's deal with your first point first. Because you're basically saying that people were stupid and that they were misled because of their stupidity. Now, I think that's deeply disrespectful to voters. I think people paid enormous attention. We had one of the highest turnouts in decades in the referendum because people were really engaged and interested. And the idea that Remainers are frightfully intelligent, sort of elite part of the British population and Leavers are thick, is, I think, one that really confounds democracy.
No, it's not. No, that's not what I said. You guys took advantage. You're not answering my question again. Is you took advantage of those poor, naive, and ill-informed, those who had no idea, because Brexit issue is so complex.
Okay. And so they had no idea. It was too complicated for them. So, do you want to take their vote? Do you want to take? Do you want to take their vote away?
No. On both sides, Remain and Leave. On both sides, people were ill-informed. And
so we shouldn't have had a vote at all.
We know now, I know personally, 100 times more than I knew then. I purely voted on a glitch that people on those sides were more attractive than people like yourself and Nigel Farage. That's why I voted.
That's great. That is the best answer. That's the best answer for voting Remain. Vote Remain because they're beautiful. You're with Berlusconi, who thought people voted for him because he was so beautiful. On the Irish border question, The Common Travel Area predates the European Union, and therefore the issue on the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic was nothing to do with the European Union. But Peter, thank you very much for calling. I appreciate your time. And now we can go to Nathaniel in Dover, so near where border issues may be very important. And Nathaniel, what do you think? The plan to leave was good enough on its own?
Good evening, Jacob. Personally, I'm gonna keep balanced in this. I'm gonna articulate my point properly and not get pent up. So, no, I don't think a plan is quite good enough. We actually crossed paths when you was on Nick Ferrari's show. I was talking about when we was talking about the border at Dover. No, I don't, because I come from a background of running a business, and in any important decision you make, you have to, whether or not it sticks to a plan or not, it is one thing, but you always need to go into any form of negotiation that's important with a plan of what you hope to achieve. And I'm not going to point fingers at certain Brexiteers and say they did this, they did that. That's by the by, that's happened. We need to move on. I think it's reckless to go into any plan, especially with something as important as Brexit, with no plan apart from, we'll just leave, because there is a lot of infrastructure which needs to be planned for and taken into account for. And if you're going to go in and try and achieve something the people who voted Brexit want, then you need to put that across in the right manner. Now, I think personally Donald Tusk, even me who voted Remain, I think his comments were absolutely outrageous. And it even insulted me. I felt insulted by it because I'm a British citizen, and it also actually felt like a personal attack on the British citizen rather than just a politician personally speaking.
Well, thank you for calling again. And for your last point, I think what's interesting is that Donald Tusk has managed to unite the British nation, and it does show something about the attitude of the European Union towards us, that it is quite condescending and thinks that leaving their precious club is such lunacy that you must be devilish if you want to do it. And he may have done more to reunite the country than any clever plan could have done. But thanks for calling. I hope you will call us again. And now let's go to Nick in Croydon. Nick.
Oh, hello there, Jacob.
Evening.
I think he has said one of the stupidest comments I've heard from a politician for years. I mean, it is literally none of his business why we're leaving. We're leaving. He should concern himself with his issues, rather than casting aspersions on the motives, the intelligence, the intellect, the planning of those who simply have a different viewpoint. So I just think it's so daft of him.
And you think that leaving was plan enough? Is that right, or is that irrespective?
You can never plan that far in front. I mean, we all have a general things we'd like. We'd like a free trade area with Europe. Of course we would. They're our nearest partners. But we'd like control ourselves somehow. We'd like free movement within controlled areas because it's our borders, not them, not theirs. And with friends, you can agree these things. I find it... I wonder whether this is not the first sign of the EU beginning to crack under the actual timetable of this. Because it is an absurd thing for someone of his diplomatic intelligence to say.
Yes, I think that's right. I think you make an excellent point. It was a show of temper, which you would have thought a senior politician ought to be able to keep under control. Well, thank you for calling. We've had excellent texts coming in. Alex texts, leaving the EU is more of an aim than a plan. For example, if I said I'm becoming a millionaire, that's an aim. I would have to implement a plan to get that aim. Anyone can say they're going to become a millionaire, but they'd have to go through steps to get there. And Joe has said Article 50 is clear on the process. If a deal cannot be done, then we leave on March the 29th and operate under WTO. That's the only plan we need. And of course, that was obvious. That was something that was made clear in the referendum campaign. People knew that after 2 years they would just leave. So now we can go to Will in Sheffield. Will, are you going to think that a plan leaving is good enough on its own, or are you with Mr. Tusk? Do you think we're all devils?
Oh no, well, I'm aiming for rapture myself. But no, I don't think you need a plan to leave something, unless it's difficult to leave. Like if I'd got stuck in a maze, I'd need a plan to leave it. But because I'm in my front room, I could quite easily just get up and walk out the front door. It's not much of a plan.
That's a very good point. And if you were in the maze, you could just take the secateurs and cut through, couldn't you? So sometimes the direct route is the best route. Well,
exactly, yeah. I just think I think his statement really highlights the kind of difference there is in Europe, because I can't tell whether he's being sarcastic or not. I mean, you would suppose there was some sarcasm there, but I really can't tell. I think it's the strange thing about Europe is that it's it's so geographically and historically connected, but so culturally diverse that's just one of the peculiarities of Europe,
So do you think this was an obscure form of bureaucratic humour?
If it was, I just can't. I couldn't. It didn't ping on my radar. That's what the point I made. I can't tell if it was supposed to be sarcasm. I couldn't tell.
So
it seemed serious.
President Tusk should stick to the day job and not try and replace the two Ronnies. Is basically
maybe Salvini. He's a comedian, isn't he? Maybe Salvini can do a few jokes, and maybe he'll get a laugh.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, stay tuned, because after the break we'll be talking about what Mrs. May needs to do next week when she goes to Brussels. Again, you're listening to Jacob Rees Mogg on LBC. It's 6:30 and time for the news with Lisa Aziz. Welcome back, or you can text 84850 or tweet me at LBC. We were just talking before the break about what Mrs. May want to say to our European partners. She's having dinner this evening with Leo Varadkar, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Ireland, and it seems to me that she should be making it pretty clear to him that if we leave without a deal, the biggest risk is to the Irish economy, that its goods pass through the UK on the way to the EU, using Great Britain as a land bridge to get to European markets. And though we've agreed in principle to allow that to continue without any further checks, if we were to apply normal checks, that would be very difficult for Irish business. And we import over £800 million net of Irish beef. We're the biggest market for Irish beef, and if the tariff of up to 80% went on Irish beef, it'd be pretty difficult for the Irish beef farmers, and that therefore making the Irish border the be-all and the end-all of our departure from the European Union is not in the interests of the Republic of Ireland. That if Europe wants to be tough and wants a punishment Brexit, they will do so at the price of Ireland, which seems to me to be a mistake and not something that anybody in the United Kingdom would want to see. So I'd encourage her to be quite forthright with Mr. Varadkar, who seems to be the cause of a lot of the problems. He has politicised the Irish border question for domestic political reasons, and that the EU has been very keen to go along with that. And then, of course, next week, Stephen Barclay, the Secretary of State of the Department for Exiting the European Union, is heading off to Brussels to meet Monsieur Barnier, and I'd encourage him to propose the Malthouse Compromise. I think it'd be great if the government weighed in behind that, because I think that has a chance of getting through Parliament. But the main topic this evening is, do you think leaving the European Union was a good enough plan on its own? And John has texted to say, I didn't expect to leave with a deal when I voted to leave in the People's Vote of 2016. And John, congratulations on reminding us that the vote in 2016 was, of course, of people, not of aliens, which makes the title of the People's Vote campaign particularly peculiar. There was no mention of a deal on the ballot paper. I expected to be leaving the EU on WTO terms. That should have been prepared for the day after the result was known, over 2.5 years ago. And that's absolutely right. The failure of the government to contemplate losing the referendum from their point of view was willful negligence and has caused problems ever since. And Scott has tweeted, he's on Mr. Tusk's side. We have a champion of Tusk. You're completely misrepresenting Tusk's word. He meant people like you, that's like me, who campaigned for this without even a shred of a clue of what it would mean, other than for your low tax haven fantasies. Please tell me how leaving the EU will help people in the northeast. Well, Scott, there are no tax haven fantasies for me. Your tweet is interesting, but is as sensible as Mr. Tusk's tweet. How will leaving the EU help people in the northeast? Because if we cut tariffs on food, clothing and footwear, that helps people across the country, and it particularly helps those who are the least well off. It helps the UK be a more competitive, market, looking to the growing markets outside the European Union rather than being tied in to the failing EU economic model. But we've got a new caller in Milton Keynes, Simon. What's your view and what is your answer to today's question? Oh, there's no Simon there. Simon has abandoned us. We're going to go to Wendy in Barnsley.
Hello, Jacob.
Hello, Wendy.
Nice to speak to you.
Thank you for calling.
Yeah, I'm just ringing because I voted to leave and my family did. It didn't say leave with the deal on the ballot paper. I expected that we would leave on the WTO rules and then negotiate a free trade deal. And I think that the way things are going, I'm really worried that with the promotion of the customs union, that Mrs May might just give in to that because she wants to get the voters from Labour on board. Our MP, as you know, in Barnsley is Labour. I've emailed him on several occasions and not getting anywhere because, we feel very strongly in this area that leave means leave. And you can't make, two sides come together like Mrs May's trying to do. That's the mistake she's made. She should have gone in looking at the leavers, voted to leave, and that was the winning side, and we negotiate a trade deal after. And I'm sure once it all settled down, even the Remainers would probably like what we got in the end.
Well, I think you're absolutely spot on. A London taxi driver said to me not that long ago that he voted to leave, not for a deal. And I think you're saying the same thing. And it really struck me, that point, that people voted to get out of the European Union, and that means leaving the single market and leaving the customs union. It doesn't mean a debate on endless points of minutiae. It means leaving. So thank you, Wendy, for that. I'm in entire agreement with you. And now we can go to Nick in Dulwich. Nick, what's your view?
Hello there. Yeah, my view is that if you look at this from a business point of view, as I'm sure you would like to, because I work in a similar business view in asset management in projects. Now, in a project like this, because it is essentially a project, we have now got an objective, but no way of how getting to it, and no plan. That is the reason that what is saying that there's no plan. Because, just for example, I was recently installing a new risk system in a fund manager, and just to say as a project manager, we're going to put in a new risk system, that is not a plan. It's much more detailed than that. You can't just say that's your objective. And also,
yes, but when you're putting in a new risk system, you're not negotiating it as you're installing it, are you? You've decided it and you've agreed it at the beginning. Whereas with leaving the European Union under Article 50, you're negotiating. So any plan you have at the start must evolve in the negotiation.
Well, it does evolve as well, but by the same token, you initially, when you go into your project, you have to have a project plan, and that will scope out the resources you need for the project, one of which is time. And Theresa May evidently jumped into this project with an end date, but absolutely no idea how to allocate the time for it. It's just completely incompetent. And as I was saying, if you look at it from a business perspective, from a project perspective, and everyone's saying we should have had businessmen running the thing, they would never have done anything like this. And the other point about a project, it has to be cancelable, and a businessman would have cancelled it ages ago because it's just going to be terrible for the country. But even so...
Well, I don't agree with you there. I think it's a marvellous release for the country and getting back control of our destiny.
Minford seem to be the only people who do think that. Just about every other...
17.4 million people are with me and Patrick Minford, but we've got Simon in Milton Keynes back, our new caller. So I've been looking forward, Simon, to hearing from you. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts is I don't think Theresa May needs to keep going back to Brussels all the time. She could just send a letter in to say, if we can't do a deal, we are going to leave on WTO terms. If you want to do a deal, my door is open. Come and talk to me.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. It was particularly disagreeable, wasn't it, when December 2017 the Prime Minister had to get up at 4 a.m. to scurry off to the demands of Brussels.
That's embarrassing. You can't negotiate with tyrants, can you?
And why didn't we let them come to us? They want our money. We're paying them for the privilege of leaving rather than the other way around.
Yeah, and just turn around to them and say, we are going to... And I don't know why she hasn't announced the WTO exit in Parliament, to be honest with you.
Well, no, I think we shouldn't be fearful of leaving on WTO terms.
No, she just needs to announce it in Parliament, says we're going to leave on WTO terms on the 29th of March. If you want to come and talk to us, my door is open. Please fly over here, because I'm not going over there anymore.
Well, Simon, I'm glad we got you back on the line because your call was worth waiting for. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. We've had another tweet from Daniel who says it was not the fault of the Brexiteers that the Cameron government called for a referendum but made no provision or contingency plan whatsoever for a leave outcome. It was a dereliction of duty of government. And Michael has said, plans that you do not agree with do not equate to no plan. Michael, you have hit the nail on the head. I think that should be sent in a large card to Monsieur Tusk, because he's probably rather upset he's not getting as many Valentine's cards as Monsieur Juncker, who got one delivered, hand-delivered, especially by the Irish Prime Minister. But I think we can now go to Joseph in Leeds, who is another new caller. Lots of new callers this evening, which is always good news. Joseph.
Hello there, Mr. Moggs. Rees
Hello.
Mogg. Yes, I was just... I disagree with the fact that you don't need a plan for a project, especially a project like Brexit. For example, I want a Ferrari. I would like to buy a Ferrari. I have no money, but I want a Ferrari. That's my project. Is it the dealer's fault that doesn't give me the Ferrari? Or is it my fault for not having a plan?
But leaving the European Union is in fact a legal and constitutional issue, isn't it? And the plan is to pass the legislation and to issue the notices, and then you leave. That's the difference.
If the conditions aren't there for leaving, you cannot leave.
But the conditions are there for leaving.
If you haven't solved the Irish border problem, right, you cannot leave.
But who's going?
You had it before beginning.
But the common travel area predates the European Union, so you don't need to have.
It doesn't matter.
But
we also have between the UK and Ireland the Good Friday Agreement. That comes before your Brexit initiative.
There's nothing in leaving the European Union that contradicts the Belfast Agreement. Absolutely nothing.
What do you mean? What about the border question?
We're running up to the news, I'm afraid, but I just want to tell people what we're going to be talking about next, because I've been challenged by Victoria Bateman, a doctor, Cambridge economics fellow, to debate with her in a state of undress, and we'll have a quick discussion of that later, but now it is 6:45 and time for the news with Lisa Aziz. Well, welcome back. We're asking today whether you think leaving the European Union is plan on its own, and you can call 0345 6060 973, text 84850, or tweet me at LBC. But we're going to have a momentary diversion, because a lady by the name of Dr. Victoria Bateman, and I wonder if she's related to Bateman of cartoon fame, who used to produce the cartoons of people absolutely shocked by some extraordinary suggestion. It would be very suitable if she were descended from him, has challenged me to debate Brexit with her in my birthday suit, which will be difficult because my birthday suit isn't double-breasted and therefore I don't think it would be decent seen in public in it. However, a rival radio station had this earlier on today.
Why I'm doing it is right here in the words on my body. Brexit leaves Britain naked.
Yes, and you've made that point, but you don't need to. I mean, should the other Brexiteers themselves do the same? I mean, maybe
I would invite them to.
What
I would
about
be quite
Jacob
happy to do. I would be quite happy to do a naked debate.
What do you think?
I invite Jacob Rees Mogg to do a naked debate with me, and we will see. We will get to the roots of this issue. The issue being that Britain faces many problems right now, from housing to the NHS.
Whether seeing Jacob Rees Mogg naked
European Union is not the cause of those problems.
I think the great John Humphreys is demob happy that as the most distinguished broadcaster on the said rival radio station, he's coming to an end of his period, which is a great shame, actually. He's one of the people I most like being interviewed by because he's simply so distinguished and has been doing it for such a long time, and you know that if you make a mistake, he will not let you get away with it. I think he's just enjoying himself a bit too much, which is why we got that suggestion. However, Dr. Bateman, if you're listening, you'd be very welcome to call in LBC on 0345 6060 973 every Friday between 6 and 7. You have a hotline, a personalised hotline, and we can discuss Brexit whenever you like. But I'm not sorry. I can reassure people that I will remain fully clothed. I think I have a face for radio, and that's best, therefore, that no more of me should be exposed. Back to the question, and to Walter in Blackpool. Walter, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I was interested in what you said about a punishment Brexit, because that punitive economic measures are totally contrary to WTO rules. But anyway, the other point I wanted to make is that what Mrs. May should now say to the EU is that our commercial infrastructure is perfectly capable of accommodating a no-deal Brexit. The fact of the matter is that the four freedoms of the European Union have concentrated economic activity towards the south of England and created this bottleneck in Dover or the southeast, whereas we have other ports. We have Bristol, we have Liverpool, we have Glasgow, we have Hull, which are perfectly capable of accommodating the extra trade which we would get if we traded on WTO rules. And I think that's quite crucial. We should, from the very outset, the moment the referendum result was announced, I said, right, we are strengthening our ports in order to be able to do trade with the world as we used to do before we are on much better terms, even with the EU itself, before we entered the European Union.
Yes, I think there are ways of sorting it out, and that we are ready to trade on WTO terms. And it's really interesting, the people operating the Port of Dover, Eurotunnel, and perhaps most importantly, the Port of Calais, have said that they're ready for us to leave however we go.
Exactly. Yes.
And we shouldn't believe these scare stories. I think there has been a great effort by those who don't want us to leave at all to make us fretful. And summoning up demonic images is part of that, really. It's the sort of exaggerated use of language that has become laughable. Nobody takes these images of disaster seriously. And so that's why people are giggling at Mr. Tusk. They're not thinking, oh, how very serious the President of the European Council thinks this. They're thinking, silly boy. Anyway, thank you, Walter. And now we'll go to James in Marlborough, who is a new caller. James.
Hello, Mr. Rees Mogg. Nice to speak to you. First-time caller, as you say. I basically want to say, at the end of the day, the British public voted to leave. There was no deal on the ballot paper. So why are the politicians all trying to get a deal that we didn't actually ask for? And as anyone actually said to Maybot, we didn't vote to leave with a deal. We voted to leave, plain and simple as. There was no deal on the ballot paper.
I think that's right. I think that's the key point, and I think that's why we should have confidence about leaving on the 29th of March. But I also think if we don't leave on the 29th of March, if the Yvette Cooper amendment is successful at any stage in delaying, that's actually not really about delaying, it's about stopping. And that the people supporting Yvette Cooper are people who want to frustrate Brexit and reject the referendum result. And I think the British voter would be entitled to feel abandoned if that were to happen. I think it would be a very, very unwise thing to do. People voted to leave, the time runs out on the 29th of March, and that is what we should do.
Well, yes, I totally agree, but at the moment, Mr. Rees Mogg, from what I see on YouTube and generally, around the country, because I travel around the country, people have no confidence in the government no more. Like, literally zero. They see the government as traitorous, liars. We don't believe anything that you say. Whenever you are asked a direct question, not yourself personally, obviously, because you do, because I've watched yourself, but the majority of politicians, when asked a direct question, they will avoid it. Now, I know politicians are known for avoiding they're known for avoiding questions, but to gain trust and respect of the British people, politicians in this country need to start giving direct, honest answers, because until they do that, we have no confidence in you whatsoever.
Well, I think that's a very good point. The problem is that of the 650 MPs, the overwhelming majority never wanted to leave the European Union, and many of them haven't come to terms with it.
They don't deserve to be in that house.
Well, thank you for calling, and I hope you'll call us again. And we've got Graham calling from Scotland. Graham, hello.
Yes, good evening, Jacob. I hope you're well this evening.
Very well, and you?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
Good.
I just wanted to point out, your question was whether just leaving the EU was a good enough plan. And I don't see that as a plan myself. That is the target. That's the end game, the goal that we wish to achieve. The plan is how we get there. And there were two options, obviously, on the table. One was with a deal, one's without a deal. If we leave with a deal, we had 2 years under Article 50 to negotiate that deal. That's the plan for leaving with a deal. And if we're leaving without a deal, well, then the government should have been planning for a no-deal exit throughout this whole stage. And that's where we are now.
Absolutely. I think that's very, very well and succinctly put. Thank you. I think we've just got time to go to Kenneth in Bishop Auckland, where I went not so long ago for a television programme. Most wonderful place. So, Kenneth, hello.
Hi, Jacob. Kenneth here. How are you?
Well, thank you. And you?
Very well indeed. Good. Jacob, there's a lot of things that worry me here. First of all, when I invest in a company, I'd look at the accounts and I'd like to see them ratified.
Oh, that's a good point.
That with the EU, so I'm not sure where my money is going. The next thing is, the world is awash with opportunity outside of the EU. If we go to Asia, China, India, even Russia, things are not as bad as everybody says. I would love to be able to trade openly and freely with them. If we just walk away from this, my 39 billion, and it is mine and everyone else's, because we pay tax to have that.
Taxpayers' money, you're quite right, yes.
Stays with us. They should be begging us. 60% of the fish that get caught in our waters are not by our fishermen. We could step outside of here, make deals with the rest of the world, the big players, China and America. They must encompass most of the world. And if we add in Russia as well, if we could be nice enough to be friendly, we could take in the whole world. We could have a bright future, as opposed to being tied to a bunch of, this sounds harsh, losers that look like they're going bankrupt.
Well, Kenneth, you're a first-time caller, and you have been depriving listeners at LBC from your wisdom for too long, so I hope you will call again and continue to make such brilliant points. Thank you. We've also had a tweet from Andy, who says, is there any reason that Article 24 of GATT cannot be applied in the case of no deal? And Andy, you're right. But it's now time to go. You've been listening to Jacob Rees Mogg on LBC. I'm here every Friday evening from 6 until 7. At 10 o'clock tonight on LBC, it's Nick Abbott. But next, it's the inestimable Andrew Pearce.
Thank you, Jacob. And coming up in the next 3 hours, we'll be talking about MPs debating whether 9 o'clock in the morning is too early for children to start school. They're debating whether they should in fact start school at 10 o'clock in the morning. Can't you just send your children to bed a little bit earlier? I might be tempted to say. Also, a grandfather has begged MPs to change the law in an emotional letter he sent moments before he ended his life at the Dignitas clinic in Switzerland. His wife is now going to be questioned by the police. But first, another hour in the Labour Party over anti-Semitism.